In honor of Hispanic Heritage Month, we're delving into Levi's and Chicano culture. I'm Tracey Panek, historian at Levi Strauss & Company and director of our archives. For many early American immigrants, Levi's were the ideal workwear. As early as the 1920s, Levi's had Spanish language flyers, and they would often focus on the two-horse brand. Two horses with a pair of our overalls in the middle. They're so strong, they just can't rip. Even if you didn't speak English, you could recognize immediately that an authentic pair of Levi's included those two horses. For many Mexican Americans, Levi's took on an important symbolism that you'd arrived. You were able to purchase an iconic American brand. We have a terrific letter in the archives written by a man named Lloyd Rodriguez. It's dated 1938, and inside is not a letter, but it's actually a salmon-colored pocket flasher. Lloyd signed his name and wrote, "I bought my first pair of Levi's at Puente department store." Levi's were available throughout the West, in cities including those close to the Mexican border. You could get them at your local tack shop or dry goods merchant. Greenspans was a family business that opened back in the 1920s that catered to Chicano customers.
We were the first store in Southgate to carry the Levi brand. We have carried Levi since 1939. Levi has been an integral part of our history and the cultures that come to us. Cholo, gangster world, as well as the lowrider world, who liked the style of the 1940s and 1950s. We sold 501s the whole time, mostly the rigid, shrink to fit. They would be creased. Sometimes they'd have a hem turned up to make a cuff called a baby cuff. In the Latino Chicano community, if you do one person wrong, you can lose 200 customers. It influences the way you do business when you have your name on the door. And having a good name and a good reputation is good business.
We have a Levi's vest in our archives. 1969, during the Civil Rights Movement, a young Los Angeles woman wore this Chicano power vest with a brown fist and a pink cross at the top. It really represents a moment in time when so many involved in the Chicano culture and civil rights movements were adopting Levi's. London-born photographer Jeanette Beckman came out to Los Angeles in the 1980s and photographed a lot of the Chicano neighborhoods.
I picked up a copy, I think it was the LA Weekly, and there was this story about an East LA gang called the Oyo Maravilla. Kind of fascinated, but there were no photos. I wanted to know who these people were and what they looked like. You know, I just kind of became obsessed. I got to photograph incredible people wearing Levi's. The way people were dressed was just amazing to me. It was perfectly pressed, perfectly laundered, and their trousers had creases in them.
My dad wore Levi's in Sinaloa, like where he's from. Having like a fresh, crispy pair of Levi's with his boots and a nice shirt was how he communicated that he was doing well. I remember watching my mom on the ironing board, starching some very rigid 501s. That crease line was so like sharp on those jeans, and that look was synonymous with the time too. I think there was a time in the 80s and 90s where like your pants had to be creased, you know?
Henry Martinez grew up in Mexico and loved Levi's. He was a forest ranger. He also was in the rodeo, and he even wanted to be buried in his Levi's. Teresa Martinez Paff used a Levi's jacket as a way to share her Hispanic roots.
My father actually kept my Hispanic roots from me and my brother. I remember the first visits to my dad's family like they were yesterday. My grandmother taught me to make tortillas by hand. We cooked them on her adobe oven in the backyard. I learned how to embrace both cultures, my father's and my mother's.
Luis Osuna is an example of the younger generation of Mexican Americans who love and embrace vintage Levi's today.
I love all the different reinterpretations of Levi's as well throughout time as the market shifted, and say like stuff that was made in Europe or stuff that was made in Japan, and all those iterations of that, something that I look forward to seeing more of as those kind of things start to hit the market.
We're proud of the role that Levi's has played historically as part of Chicano culture and identity, and are excited about the next generation of Levi's Chicano fans. Thanks for joining us for another episode in the Levi's Archives.